Hey guys, so this morning I wanted to talk about the Blake shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin. If you've read the headlines, then you undoubtedly know that a black man was shot 7 times in the back by a white officer while getting into his vehicle. Now, this headline will make your blood boil. But when you watch the actual video, now there's 2 of them that have been released, the facts of the case become evident. Now, Mr. Blake had just finished a physical altercation with the police, in which he stood up, turned his back on the officers, and went to his car. Turning your back on an officer is not justifying reason to be shot. Getting in your car is not necessarily a justifying reason to get shot. Having a physical altercation with the police, standing up, disobeying their orders, and reaching into the floorboard of your car, that is justifiable reason to be shot. In fact, if you watch any of the 48 Hours Investigates or Law and Order series, you might have recognized this exact action as suicide by cop. Now, I'm probably going to make a lot of people mad by saying that, but what else do you expect to happen? If you are in the middle of a field sobriety checkpoint and you decide to ignore the officer, open up your car door, and start reaching for something, what is the officer meant to believe you were doing? Do you keep flowers under your floor mat? Were you going to pick him a daisy? I highly doubt that. And if I were an officer, I wouldn't take the chance. If you make quick or deliberate motions in an area where an officer cannot see where your hands are going, there's a very, very high chance you're going to wind up shot. Now, I'm really glad that Mr. Blake has survived, and it seems that he is going to pull through. Hopefully he has no permanent damage. But they've already tried to sue the state. They've already filed a lawsuit, and I hope they lose. A lot of people are upset that the officers didn't do something to try to take him down sooner, tackle him, or wound him, or tase him. Well, from what I've read, the taser malfunctioned. I haven't been able to get proof of this, but that's what many of the reports seem to say. Before both of the videos start, apparently they had tried to tase him. Now, when you watch the 2 videos, the man stands up. Mr. Blake stands up. He is not the only individual around. Therefore, the police officers cannot divert 100% of their attention to that man. There are still 4 or 5 other individuals which, as far as they're aware, could be threats. If the officer were to try to tackle him, notice they all had their firearms in their hand. If you tackle someone with a firearm in your hand, there's a chance you're going to drop your weapon. There were kids around. There were other people around. As an officer, you cannot lose your firearm. That is why he screamed stop a dozen times. Now, I truly wish that our police force had 500-pound Kevlar blankets that they could just throw over someone when they were being unruly that made them stay on the ground until backup arrived. I wish we had net guns that you could shoot at a suspect that wrapped them up and took them to the ground so that these kind of shootings could be avoided. However, you are not allowed to take your gun and shoot someone in the leg or in the foot to keep them from walking away. Now, I say in this instance, I would much rather the officer have shot Mr. Blake in the leg as he was walking around the front of his car. That would have saved a lot of drama, and it would have saved probably quite a lot of burning buildings in Wisconsin. But let me give you a bit of history. Some of us were alive during the Rodney King riots, after Rodney King was beaten by police officers, and some of us remember the policy changes that came about after this. Back in the old days, if you had an unruly suspect, you could take out your stick and beat them. Okay? Some people were beat way too far and died, and justifiably so, they've stopped that practice. But because they've stopped that practice, that means that that officer couldn't do something to just hurt Mr. Blake. He can only use required force when it is absolutely necessary. Notice if you watch this video, he doesn't shoot the man as he's walking in front of his car. This man is begging. You can see it in the man's face. He wants Mr. Blake to just stop and comply. But the second Mr. Blake opens that car door, leans inside, and his hands become invisible to the police officer, that police officer has to expect the worst. We have not heard any confirmed reports that there was a firearm under the seat of that vehicle, but it wouldn't surprise me. As an officer, I'm not going to risk, I'm not an officer, but if I were an officer, I would not risk not going home to see my family on the off chance that Mr. Blake was going to get me a dandelion out of his floor mat. Now, again, this, to me, appears to be an open and shut case of suicide by cop. Disagree all you want. If you reach for your waistband during a heated altercation with the police, there's a good chance you're going to be shot. The same as if you turn your back to them and reach in your floorboard for something that they have no idea what it is. This does not justify any rioting or any looting. Is it sad? Absolutely. It's sad that a man almost lost his life. It's sad that an officer now has to deal with the memories of firing his weapon at a man every time he goes to sleep. This year's Christmas, that officer is going to hear those gunshots. The only person traumatized here is not Mr. Blake or his children, who I'm very sorry to say had to watch what happened. But the blame rests on Mr. Blake. I understand people's distaste and anger at police officers. Police officers have to enforce stupid rules, one of which is the mask mandate. There's lots of other rules, but when you have an officer enforce a ridiculous law, what you do is you create negative interactions with the police. Certain cultures, especially the youth culture in America today, believes they should be able to turn their back on the cop and the cop shouldn't be able to do anything. Well, if you can just walk away from the people in charge when you've done something wrong, how are they expected to enforce the laws? They can't be. So we have to have law and order. I am all for police reform, but the police reform has to be smart, it has to be intelligent, and we really need to allow our officers to have a say in what reform comes. They know which laws create negative interactions with them, and I would imagine most of them would love to stop enforcing them. Now, that being said, let me reiterate one more time. What happened to Mr. Blake in Wisconsin is sad, but it's justified. And I would not be surprised if Mr. Blake hated the idea of going to jail or going back to jail so much that he thought he'd make his last stand. And I have no doubt in my mind that Mr. Blake thought he was going to die. And I have no doubt in my mind that the officer did too. So, I'm going to have this is a public service announcement for everyone watching. If you reach for something somewhere that an officer cannot see in the middle of an altercation, you are committing suicide by cop. Period. End of story. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, if you have enjoyed some of my previous videos, the COVID witch trials, COVID 1984, please hit like, hit share, and hit the little bell up top so that you never miss a video. We are working with some other influencers on creating an entire conservative libertarian network where we provide content every day. If you're interested in helping us get this started, or you're interested in joining us for one of our weekly shows, please message me. And as always, guys, thank you for watching.